Every life is a story, every moment a chapter. Here on Slow English Stories, we pause to listen.
Welcome to Slow English Stories.
We read stories at a slower speed to help you learn English.
Today's story is a fun folktale.
It is about a simple man who has some very strange luck.
His name was Hans. He was a simple peasant. The sun was warm on his shoulders. He walked home from the market. In his pocket, 7 silver thalers felt heavy. They felt important. He had sold his cow, Bessie. The price was good. He smiled.
The silver coins were round. They were cool in his hand. They were a promise of food for the winter. They were a promise of new shoes for his wife. The world felt right. The birds in the trees sang a happy song. Hans felt like singing with them. He was a good man. He worked hard. Today, the world had rewarded him.
His path took him past a large, quiet pond. The water was still, like green glass. As he got closer, a deep sound started. It was a rhythmic sound. It came from the water. It was a chorus of voices singing together.
Act, 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 act.
Hans stopped walking. He tilted his head and listened carefully. The sound was very clear. In his language, act sounded like the word for 8. His brow wrinkled with confusion. 8, he said aloud. No, that is not right. The merchant gave me 7.
He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the coins. He laid them on a flat stone beside the road. He counted them one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, there were only 7. He looked back at the pond. The frogs continued their song. It was louder now. It was more insistent. Act, 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 act.
They seemed to shout at him. Hans was a man who respected nature. He believed that old trees had wisdom. He believed the wind carried messages. Surely, these frogs knew something he did not. Perhaps the merchant had made a mistake. Perhaps he had cheated Hans. A feeling of frustration grew in his chest. He walked to the edge of the water. The green surface was dotted with the small heads of frogs. Their throats puffed out as they sang.
You stupid animals, he shouted. His voice echoed across the water. I was paid 7 thalers, not 8. Do you think I cannot count? The frogs stopped for a moment. Then they began again. They seemed to be laughing at him. Act, 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 act.
Hans felt his face grow hot. These creatures were so sure of themselves. They were so certain he was wrong. He was a simple man. He believed in listening to the world. If so many creatures were telling him the same thing, maybe they were right. He had an idea. It was a simple, honest idea.
Fine, he called out to the pond. If you are so clever, then you can count the money yourselves. With a strong flick of his wrist, he threw the 7 silver thalers into the pond. They made a series of small splashes. Then they disappeared into the green water.
Hans stood at the edge of the pond. His hands were on his hips. He waited. He expected the frogs to count the coins. He expected them to realize their mistake and return them. He waited for a long time. The sun began to move down the sky. It painted the clouds orange and pink.
The frogs continued to sing their song. Act, 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 act. Hans sighed. The money was gone. He had trusted the frogs. They had kept his silver. Shaking his head at his bad luck, he turned. He continued his walk home. His pocket was now light and empty. He was not angry, only disappointed. He was sure he had done the logical thing.
A few weeks passed. The winter was coming closer. The memory of the 7 lost thalers was a cold thought. Hans had one last cow. He knew what he must do. He could not sell this one. He needed to make a better bargain. He butchered the cow himself. He loaded the fresh meat onto his small wooden cart. He would take it to the town. He would sell it piece by piece. This time, he would be careful. He would make enough money to forget the clever frogs.
He pulled his cart into the town square. The air was filled with sounds of people and horses. As he approached the butcher's shop, a very large dog came out. It was a mastiff with a broad chest. It had a serious face. The dog belonged to the butcher. It walked slowly toward Hans's cart. It sniffed the air. Its tail gave a slow, thoughtful wag. It looked at the meat, then looked at Hans. It opened its great mouth and let out a deep bark. Wow, wow, what now?
Hans's eyes opened wide. He understood the dog perfectly. It was not just a bark, it was a question. It was a business proposal. Hans smiled. Here was an honest creature, a working dog. He could trust a dog like this. He leaned forward and spoke to the mastiff. He spoke in a serious voice, as one businessman to another.
I know you want this meat, he said. He pointed to his cart. And it is very good meat. But I cannot simply give it to you. I have a family to feed. The dog listened, its head tilted. It barked again, a short, sharp sound. Ah, Hans said, nodding. You want to take it to your master now. He will pay me later. That is a good idea. He thought for a moment. All right, here is the deal. You can take all the meat. But you must bring me the money in 3 days. I trust you.
The dog seemed to agree. It barked once more. It began pulling a large piece of meat from the cart. Soon, other dogs from the street came running. They saw the mastiff's success. They surrounded the cart. They barked and pulled at the meat. Hans watched them. Hark, he said to himself. Now they all want some. But the big one is responsible. He made the deal.
He left the cart with the dogs. He walked away, feeling pleased. He had made a very clever bargain. He did not need to stand in the market all day. The butcher's dog would handle everything. 3 days passed. Hans waited at home. He told his wife about the clever dog. He told her about the good bargain he had made. She just looked at him with tired eyes.
On the morning of the fourth day, no money had arrived. Hans's patience was gone. "There is no trusting anyone these days," he muttered. He marched into town. His steps were heavy with purpose. He walked straight into the butcher's shop. The butcher was a large man. He had a white apron covered in flour and blood. He was cutting a piece of pork.
"Good morning," Hans said loudly. "I have come for my money." The butcher looked up, confused. "Your money? What money?" "The money for the meat," Hans said. He tried to stay calm. "The meat from my cow. Your big dog took all of it 3 days ago. We made a deal." The butcher stared at Hans for a long moment. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that filled the shop.
A deal?
"With my dog," he roared. Hans did not see the joke. Jesting apart, he said firmly, "I will have my money." The butcher's laughter stopped. His face turned red with anger. "Are you mad?" he shouted. "Get out of my shop." He grabbed a long broom from the corner. He waved it at Hans. "Get out before I teach you a lesson."
Hans saw the look in the butcher's eyes. He turned and ran out of the shop. The angry butcher chased him into the street. The butcher shouted about madmen and thieves. Hans did not stop running until he was outside the town walls. His heart was pounding. His face was burning with shame. He had lost everything. The frogs had his money. The dogs had his meat. This was not right. This was not just. There was only one person who could help him now. He would go to the king.
The king's throne room was a vast, silent place. Heavy tapestries hung on the stone walls. They showed pictures of great battles. Guards stood like statues in polished armor. Their faces were empty of expression. The nobles of the court sat on wooden benches. Their fine clothes were bright with color, but their faces were gray with boredom.
On a great golden throne sat the king. He looked tired. His crown seemed to press down on his head. Beside him, on a smaller throne, sat his daughter. Her name was Princess Anneliese. She was beautiful. She had hair the color of dark honey. She had eyes as blue as a summer sky. But her eyes held no light. They were like windows into an empty room. It was said that the princess had never laughed. Not once in her entire life.
Into this silent, serious room walked Hans. He was dusty from the road. His clothes were simple and worn. He was not afraid. He was a man with a grievance. He had come to seek justice. He walked to the center of the room and bowed. He did it because it seemed like a polite thing to do. The king looked down at him. "Who are you, and what do you want?" the king asked. His voice was flat and tired. "I am Hans, your majesty," he said, "and I have been wronged. I have come for justice."
The king sighed. "Tell your story." And so Hans told his story. He spoke simply and directly. He spoke as if talking to a neighbor. He told the king about his cow and the 7 silver thalers. He described his conversation with the frogs. He explained why he threw his money into the water. He told of his second cow and the good meat. He described the serious, businesslike mastiff. He explained the terms of their agreement. Finally, he told of the angry butcher with the broom. He told the whole story with complete sincerity. He believed every word he said.
As Hans spoke about the frogs, a small smile touched the lips of Princess Anneliese. It was a tiny thing like a secret. When he described his business deal with the dog, a little sound escaped her. It was a soft, breathy giggle. No one in the court had ever heard this sound before. The nobles shifted on their benches. They looked at each other in surprise. The king leaned forward on his throne. His tired eyes were suddenly alert.
And when Hans reached the end of his story, something wonderful happened. He described how the angry butcher had chased him. Princess Anneliese threw back her head and laughed. It was not a small, polite laugh. It was a loud, clear, beautiful sound. It echoed through the silent hall. It was like the sun breaking through gray clouds. It was the sound of pure, honest joy.
The entire court froze. The guards, the nobles, and the king all stared in shock. The laughter filled the room. It washed away the silence and the sadness. The king looked at his daughter. Tears of happiness filled his eyes. He had promised a great reward to any man who could make his daughter laugh. He had promised his daughter's hand in marriage. He stood up and pointed a royal finger at Hans. "You have done what no other man could do," the king declared. "You have made the princess laugh. You will marry my daughter."
A wave of shock passed through the court. A simple peasant would marry the princess. Hans looked at the beautiful, laughing princess. He looked at the happy king. Then he shook his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. His voice was calm and simple. "That is a very kind offer, but I cannot accept." The king's smile vanished. "What? Why not?"
"Well," Hans explained patiently, "I have a wife at home already. And, to be honest, she is more than enough work. When I go home, it feels like I have a wife in every corner. I do not think I could manage another." A new silence fell over the room. It was a silence of disbelief. The princess's laughter stopped. The king's face turned from happy to angry. He felt insulted. A peasant had refused his daughter.
"You are a fool," the king bellowed. His voice thundered. Hans was not insulted. He just nodded. "My lord king," he replied calmly. "What can you expect from an ox but beef?" The king stared at him, stunned by this strange answer. His anger was so great, he could not think of a punishment. "Leave my sight," he commanded. "Go now, but return in 3 days. Then you shall receive your reward. You will receive 500.
Hans did not understand the king's anger. he heard the number 500. He thought the king meant 500 silver thalers. He smiled, bowed, and left the throne room. He felt very happy indeed. The king had not given him justice, but he had offered him a fortune.
3 days later, Hans returned to the palace. He was brought to the king's private treasury. The king was there, sitting on a simple wooden chair. His face was like a thundercloud. Standing beside him was another man. He was a wealthy moneylender named Master Boris. He was dressed in a fine velvet coat. He had a smug, superior smile on his face. Master Boris had heard Hans complaining in the town. Boris went straight to the king to report Hans's words.
Boris was worried the king's anger might cool. He wanted to see the peasant punished. He wanted his own reward from the king. When he saw Hans in his dusty clothes, he had an idea. "You cannot appear before the king like that," Boris had said. "Here, I will lend you my fine coat." A man should look his best when receiving a reward. Hans had agreed. Now he stood before the king. He looked quite grand in the borrowed velvet coat.
The king pointed a finger at Hans. "Moneylender," he said to Boris, "you told me this peasant was speaking ill of me. Now, peasant, repeat the words you said." Master Boris smirked. The trap was set. But Hans was not a liar. He looked at the king's angry face. He looked at the moneylender's greedy, smiling face. He understood that this man was his enemy. He spoke in his usual simple, honest way.
"Your Majesty," he began, "you should never believe a word that comes out of a moneylender's mouth. No truth is in him. He only thinks of gold." Hans paused, then looked at the fine coat he was wearing. "Why," he continued, "I bet he is so dishonest. He would even tell you that this fine coat I am wearing is his own."
"What?" cried Boris. His smug smile turned into a mask of outrage. He had fallen right into the trap. "Of course it is my coat. I lent it to you. I lent it to you out of pure kindness." The king looked from Hans's simple face to the moneylender's red, angry one. He thought to himself, "One of them is lying to me. This peasant seems too simple to invent such a clever lie." The moneylender, however, has the face of a man who loves gold more than truth.
The king's anger began to fade. It was replaced by a deep amusement. This simple peasant had a strange and wonderful kind of luck. So, the king said to Boris, "You admit the coat is yours. And you heard me promise this man a reward of 500. The king smiled a cold smile. "Guards, pay the moneylender the 500 I promised this peasant." 2 guards stepped forward and seized Master Boris. They paid him his reward not in silver, but in 500 lashes with a whip.
The king then turned to Hans. The king was no longer angry. He was laughing again, a deep, rumbling laugh. "Hans," he said, "you have already lost your reward. So I will give you another." He pointed to the open door of his treasury. Piles of gold and silver coins shone in the torchlight. "Go in," the king said. "Go into my treasure chamber. Take as much money as your pockets can hold."
Hans did not need to be told twice. He walked into the treasury. He began stuffing gold coins into the deep pockets of the velvet coat. He filled them until they were heavy and bulging. Then he bowed to the king one last time. He walked out of the palace and onto the road that led home. The sun was warm on his shoulders. He felt the wonderful weight of the gold in his pockets. He touched the soft velvet of the coat. He looked up at the blue sky and smiled a slow, happy smile. "This time," he said to himself, "this time, I think I have made a good bargain."
That was our story for today.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Slow English Stories.
Join us again next time for another story.